The afternoon shift was dragging. Marcus adjusted his security badge and scanned the gleaming hallways of the luxury mall. He liked things neat, controlled. His job wasn't just a paycheck. It was order, his little kingdom where nothing unexpected ever happened. He knew exactly who belonged in the boutiques and upscale cafes, and who didn't. Out of the corner of his eye, Marcus spotted a woman approaching the entrance. She was striking, tall, elegant, and impeccably dressed in a white blazer that screamed designer. But something about her presence made him tense. Maybe it was the confident way she walked or how she scanned the place like she owned it. And that, Marcus thought, was the problem. People like her don't just walk into places like this without raising suspicion. "Excuse me, ma'am." He stepped forward, blocking the glass doors before she could enter. "Can I help you?" The woman, Nina, offered a polite smile. "I'm here for the opening event at La Maison," she said. Her tone was calm, almost rehearsed, as if she had dealt with this kind of thing before. "I need to get through, please." Marcus crossed his arms, his expression tightening. La Maison is an invitation-only event. "Are you on the guest list?" "Yes, I am," Nina replied, unruffled. She held up a sleek leather bag and began searching for her phone, probably to show him the confirmation email. But Marcus wasn't having it. He'd seen this before, people bluffing their way into places they didn't belong. He decided to make things clear from the start. "Look, ma'am, I don't want to cause any trouble, but this area isn't open to the public today. You'll need to leave." Nina stopped searching her bag and looked at him directly. There was no anger in her expression, only quiet determination. "I just told you, I'm supposed to be here. I have every right to attend that event." Marcus could feel eyes starting to gather around them, bystanders lingering, curious. A mother with a stroller slowed down, pretending to adjust her child's blanket while eavesdropping. A group of teenagers stood a few feet away, their phones out, recording. Marcus's neck stiffened. He didn't like an audience, especially one that might question his authority. He took a step closer, dropping his voice into the tone he reserved for difficult customers. "Miss, I don't want to escalate this, but if you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have to call someone to escort you out." Nina blinked, her calm demeanor unwavering. "Escalate? I'm here for an event my family is directly involved with. I don't understand why you're treating me like I don't belong." Marcus felt the heat rise to his face. She wasn't backing down, and he hated it. It didn't make sense. Why not just walk away? She could be lying. She must be lying. He worked here for years, and women like her, elegant, black, too comfortable, always set off alarm bells. "I need to see some ID," Marcus snapped. "If you're really supposed to be here, prove it." Nina tilted her head, a flicker of disappointment crossing her face. "You didn't ask anyone else for ID." Her voice was low, not confrontational, but it hit Marcus like a slap. "Why do you think I don't belong here?" Marcus bristled. "Ma'am, this isn't about..." "Isn't it?" Nina interrupted softly. She didn't raise her voice, but the words hung heavy in the air. The crowd around them grew. Some were whispering. A man muttered something about security overstepping. Marcus clenched his jaw. He wasn't going to lose control in front of all these people. He had to assert his authority now or things would spiral. "You need to leave. Now." His voice was sharp and final. "I don't care who you say you are." Nina didn't flinch. She took a deep breath, steady and slow, as if she were giving him one last chance to reconsider. "Do you really want to do this?" she asked quietly. Marcus scoffed, crossing his arms tighter. "I'm just doing my job." Nina nodded, as if she had expected nothing less. "Fine," she said. "Call the manager. I'll wait." The words hit Marcus like a challenge. Call the manager? Was she serious? He glanced around the crowd, feeling the pressure mounting. This wasn't going the way he wanted, but he wasn't going to back down, not now. "Fine," Marcus muttered under his breath, reaching for his radio. "Let's see what happens when the manager gets here." He called for the restaurant manager, half expecting to win this showdown the moment backup arrived. Marcus was certain that Nina's bluff would fall apart as soon as someone else verified her story. Minutes later, the manager of La Maison, a short, nervous man in an expensive suit, arrived, weaving through the crowd toward them. His eyes landed on Nina, and his face immediately lit up with recognition. "Miss Nina, I'm so sorry for the delay. The manager extended his hand, his voice dripping with apology. "We've been expecting you." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "You," he stammered, unable to process what he was hearing. "You know her?" The manager looked confused for a moment, then gave Marcus a puzzled frown. "Of course. This is Nina Davenport, the daughter of Mr. Davenport, our new owner." The crowd let out a collective murmur, the onlookers exchanging glances of disbelief and satisfaction. The mother with the stroller raised her eyebrows in amused pity, and the teenagers holding their phones snickered under their breath. Marcus stood frozen, his mind scrambling to catch up. Owner? He had just humiliated the daughter of the man who now owned the entire mall. Before he could recover, Nina gave him a small, polite smile. "Thank you for doing your job," she said, her voice cool and composed. "But next time, maybe don't assume so much about people. You never know who you're talking to." The crowd rippled with soft laughter, some nervous, some amused. Marcus could feel the heat crawling up his neck, burning with shame. His authority, his control, his little kingdom shattered in front of everyone. Nina turned to the manager. "Please take me to the restaurant. I'd like to see how the launch is going." "Right away, Miss Nina." The manager shot Marcus one last, disappointed look before escorting her through the glass doors, leaving Marcus standing in the middle of the crowd. His hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. He could still feel the weight of the onlookers' stares, their judgment pressing down on him like a heavy stone. The mall that once felt like his domain now felt suffocating, alien. For the first time in years, Marcus felt powerless. Marcus stood frozen long after Nina and the manager disappeared through the glass doors. His heart hammered in his chest, his mind spinning, trying to make sense of what just happened. He could still hear the faint murmurs of the crowd dispersing, feel the weight of their stares lingering like an invisible bruise on his pride. His radio crackled. "Marcus, everything okay down there?" another guard asked. He pressed the talk button, but couldn't find the words. Everything was not okay. It was a disaster. The whispers about what happened spread quickly. By the time Marcus reached the break room, his fellow guards had already heard. "Man, you really screwed up," muttered Greg, a younger guard scrolling through social media on his phone. "They're talking about you on TikTok already. Want to see?" He turned his phone toward Marcus, the screen showing a grainy video from the crowd earlier. In the video, Marcus stood stiff, brow furrowed, confronting Nina. Then came the manager's arrival and the humiliating reveal. Daughter of the owner. The clip ended with Nina's sharp but composed parting words, followed by chuckles from onlookers. Marcus swatted the phone away, scowling. "Turn that off." Greg smirked. "People love this stuff, man. Security guards overstepping, getting checked? That's gold." "Enough," Marcus snapped, his voice low and sharp, though his hands trembled slightly. Greg shrugged, slipping the phone into his pocket. "Hey, just saying, if she really gets you fired, good luck finding another gig." Marcus glared at him, but said nothing. The thought had already crossed his mind. And what made it worse was the gnawing feeling that Greg was right. Jobs like these were hard to come by, and he had been hanging on to this one by a thread as it was. A complaint from someone as powerful as Nina could ruin him. He clenched his fists under the table. He needed to talk to someone, anyone, who might understand how unfair the whole situation felt. He wasn't a racist, he told himself. He was just trying to do his job. Was that a crime now? Later that afternoon, Marcus met with Todd, the mall's general manager, who was not in the mood to sugarcoat anything. "You do realize what kind of mess you've made, right?" Todd leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples in frustration. Marcus sat across from him, stiff and defensive. "Look, I didn't know who she was. I was just doing my job." She looked suspicious. Todd's eyebrows shot up. Suspicious? A woman in a designer suit, on her way to a restaurant opening. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "You know what I mean? She didn't look like the usual crowd." Todd's expression darkened. "That's exactly the problem, Marcus. You made a judgment based on nothing but what she looked like. And now, the daughter of the man who owns this place thinks we treat guests unfairly. Do you understand how serious this is?" Marcus bit the inside of his cheek. "I was just being cautious." "Yeah? Well, cautious might cost you your job this time." Todd shook his head. "You know who gave you a second chance when you were almost let go last year?" Mr. Davenport, Nina's father. He specifically asked us to give you more time. Marcus blinked, stunned. What? Todd leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. Mr. Davenport saw your file, saw that you were struggling, but he believed in giving people a second chance. And how do you repay him? By harassing his daughter. Marcus's stomach churned. He had no idea. The man he just disrespected, through Nina, was the very person who kept him employed. So what happens now? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. Todd sighed heavily. I don't know yet. It's not up to me. Nina hasn't said whether she wants you fired, but let's just say it's not looking good. Marcus spent the rest of his shift in a haze, his mind tangled in guilt and frustration. He paced the hallways of the mall, trying to calm the storm building inside him, but every thought only made things worse. How had he gotten it so wrong? How had everything spiraled so quickly? By evening, the mall was quieter, but Marcus's nerves were still raw. He couldn't stop replaying the confrontation in his head. Each time, Nina's composed expression, the effortless way she dismantled him, burned deeper into his memory. He wanted to be angry at her, for embarrassing him, for making him feel small, but the truth was Nina hadn't raised her voice or disrespected him. She had simply let him humiliate himself. His shift ended, and as Marcus stepped into the cool evening air, he checked his phone out of habit. A notification from Greg popped up. Bro, it's blowing up. Better check your emails. Davenport's probably already called Todd. Marcus groaned, shoving the phone back into his pocket. He hated how easily things could spiral online. It didn't matter what his intentions had been. Once a story like this spread, the narrative was out of his control. At home, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, nursing a beer and staring at his reflection in the dark window. He thought about the path that had led him here, years of scraping by, working odd security jobs, always feeling like he had to prove himself. The world had never given him the benefit of the doubt, and in turn, he had learned not to give it to anyone else. But now, that same mindset had landed him in trouble. He thought about Nina's father, Mr. Davenport. How many times had that man walked into places and been treated like Marcus treated Nina today? How many doors had been closed in his face before he built the fortune that allowed him to own a place like this? The irony hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had spent years judging others the way the world once judged him. And now, when given the chance to treat someone fairly, he had failed. He rubbed his face with both hands, frustration and regret boiling inside him. The worst part was, he knew there was nothing he could do to undo the damage. The videos were out there. The story was spreading. And soon, Nina would decide whether or not he still had a job. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Helpless. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. It had been hours since the incident, but he was too anxious to sleep. He refreshed his email obsessively, expecting the inevitable message from Todd. Termination notice. His chest felt tight, as if the walls of his small apartment were closing in. Finally, his phone buzzed, but it wasn't Todd. The screen showed an unknown number. Hesitating, Marcus answered. Marcus? A deep, familiar voice came through the line. It was Mr. Davenport. Marcus's pulse quickened. He had never spoken directly with the mall's owner before, much less expected a call from him at night. Davenport's voice was calm, almost friendly, but Marcus could feel the weight behind every word. I heard about what happened today with my daughter, Davenport began. Marcus swallowed hard. Look, sir, I don't want excuses. Davenport cut him off gently, but firmly. I just want you to meet me. Tomorrow morning. My office. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone in disbelief. He knew this wasn't going to be a casual chat. Tomorrow, everything would come to a head. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the mall before his shift started, sweat collecting at the back of his neck despite the cold breeze. Davenport's office was located on the top floor, tucked away from the noise of the retail floors. Marcus's heart pounded as he knocked on the heavy wooden door. Come in, a voice called. When Marcus stepped inside, Nina was sitting across from her father, perfectly composed. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Davenport stood behind his desk, hands clasped in front of him. Sit, Davenport said calmly, motioning to a chair. Marcus sat down, rigid, clutching his hands in his lap. The room felt stifling. He could feel the weight of Nina's gaze, sharp and steady, but she remained silent. Davenport leaned forward, fixing Marcus with a measured stare. "Do you know why I gave you another chance last year, Marcus?" Marcus shifted in his seat, unsure how to respond. "No, sir." Davenport's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was no malice in them. Only something much worse, disappointment. "Because I know what it's like to be dismissed, judged, ignored. I grew up poor, couldn't afford anything in places like this mall. And whenever I walked into spaces like these, I was treated the same way you treated my daughter yesterday." Marcus's throat went dry. The words hit harder than he expected. Davenport wasn't just angry. He was showing Marcus exactly how deep his failure went. The silence in the room stretched unbearably until Nina finally spoke. "Do you know what the worst part was?" she asked softly. Marcus dared to meet her gaze for the first time. "The way you looked at me," Nina continued, her voice steady but edged with hurt. "Like I was lying, like I couldn't possibly belong here. That's the part one won't forget." Marcus's chest tightened. He wanted to defend himself, to say that he hadn't meant it that way, but he knew it would sound hollow. She was right. In that moment, he had judged her exactly as Davenport described, through the lens of his own prejudice. "I thought I was doing my job," Marcus mumbled, but even as the words left his mouth, they felt small, flimsy. "That's the problem," Nina replied, without missing a beat. "You thought your job was to decide who belonged and who didn't." Davenport leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I don't believe in throwing people away, Marcus. I've been given second chances, and I try to do the same for others." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this. "I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice low but sincere. "I didn't mean to." "Intentions don't matter," Nina interrupted. "What matters is what you did." Marcus lowered his gaze. She was right again. It didn't matter that he hadn't intended harm. His actions had still hurt her. Davenport exhaled slowly, as if weighing a difficult decision. "Here's the thing, Marcus. I could fire you right now. I have every reason to, but I want to know if you're really willing to change." Marcus's head snapped up. I am," he said quickly. "I'll do whatever it takes." Nina raised an eyebrow, as if skeptical. "What would that even look like?" she asked pointedly. "You think saying sorry is enough?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I know it's not." His voice wavered, but there was genuine remorse behind it. I never thought about how I see people. I didn't realize." He trailed off, unsure how to put into words the shift happening inside him. Davenport studied Marcus for a long moment before speaking again. "I'm not interested in words, Marcus. I want action." Marcus nodded, clutching the edge of his chair. "I'll prove it. I swear." Davenport exchanged a glance with Nina, who remained quiet for a moment longer, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. "All right," Davenport said, his tone serious but not unkind. "Here's the deal. You keep your job, but on two conditions." Marcus sat up straighter, his heart pounding. "Anything. First," Davenport continued, "you'll go through mandatory sensitivity training. And I mean real training, not just sitting through a video." Marcus nodded eagerly. "I'll do it." "And second," Davenport added, "you're on probation. One more complaint, just one, and you're gone. No exceptions." Marcus swallowed hard. "Understood." Davenport leaned back in his chair, his gaze still sharp but a little softer now. "You're lucky, Marcus. Don't waste this chance." Marcus nodded again, grateful but humbled. "I won't, sir." "Thank you." Davenport gave a small, curt nod. "You can go." Marcus stood, feeling a strange mixture of shame and relief. As he turned toward the door, Nina's voice stopped him. "One more thing," she said. Marcus turned back, bracing himself. "Next time," Nina said, her gaze steady, "think before you act." Her words lingered in the air, heavy and undeniable. Marcus gave a short nod, unable to say anything more, and left the room. Walking down the corridor, Marcus felt lighter, but not in a good way. It was the weight of certainty that had left him, certainty in his assumptions, his authority, his view of the world. He knew he had gotten lucky today, but luck wouldn't save him next time. If he wanted to keep his job and his dignity, he would need to become someone better than the man who stood at that entrance yesterday. As he reached the ground floor, Marcus looked out at the mall. Everything looked the same: polished floors, gleaming shop windows, neatly dressed customers moving about. But Marcus knew that, for him, nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The following days were tense. Marcus went through his shifts in a daze, knowing that every interaction was now a potential threat. His probation loomed over him like a storm cloud. Every glance from customers or fellow employees felt like judgment. He couldn't shake the feeling that everyone knew about Nina, about the incident, and about how close he'd come to losing everything. At first, Marcus thought the worst part would be the stares or the whispers. But it wasn't. The hardest part was Todd's silent disappointment. His supervisor no longer greeted him in the morning. No more casual jokes, no friendly advice. Todd spoke to him only when absolutely necessary. And even then, his tone was clipped and cold. The sensitivity training began the next week. Marcus had expected a dry, check-the-box course where he could zone out and get it over with. Instead, it turned out to be a small group session led by an experienced facilitator, a woman named Kendra. She was sharp, insightful, and had no patience for empty apologies. "Let's talk about assumptions," Kendra said on the first day, standing at the front of the room with a whiteboard marker in hand. "Why do people like Marcus here?" She gave him a pointed glance. "Assume that someone doesn't belong in certain spaces?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling the weight of the group's eyes on him. A man across the room, an older employee from another store, chimed in. "It's easier that way. People assume things because it's faster than thinking things through." Kendra nodded. "Exactly. It's lazy thinking. And when we're lazy with people, we hurt them." Her gaze landed squarely on Marcus. "Tell me, Marcus, why did you assume Nina didn't belong that day?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. He could feel the weight of the room's silence, waiting for his answer. I didn't think I was assuming anything. I thought I was being cautious," he mumbled. Kendra raised an eyebrow. "Cautious about what, exactly? Was she a threat? Was she being disruptive?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no good answer, and everyone in the room knew it. Kendra leaned forward, her voice softening but still firm. "You weren't protecting them all, Marcus. You were protecting your idea of who belongs and who doesn't. That's not caution. That's bias." After the session, Marcus lingered outside the building, feeling emotionally wrung out. He didn't want to admit it, but Kendra's words hit harder than he expected. For the first time, he began to confront the uncomfortable truth that the problem wasn't just the way he saw Nina. It was the way he saw the world. Back at the mall, things hadn't improved much. Greg, always looking to stir trouble, made things worse. One afternoon, he cornered Marcus in the break room, grinning. "So, how's the training going? Learning how not to be a jerk?" Marcus shot him a warning look. "Back off, Greg." But Greg wasn't finished. "You know, everyone's talking. They're saying you only kept your job because Davenport's soft. If it were me, I'd be long gone by now." Marcus clenched his jaw. "It's not your business, Greg." Greg shrugged, just saying, "People don't forget stuff like that. One slip up, and you're done." The words hung in the air long after Greg left. Marcus knew there was truth in them. One mistake, one wrong word, one moment of carelessness, and everything would fall apart. That night, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Kendra's words, about Todd's silence, about the way Nina had looked at him. Not with anger, but with disappointment. He hated that look more than anything. Disappointment meant they had expected more from him. The next day, Marcus decided he needed to start small, prove to himself and to others that he could be better. He wasn't going to magically change overnight, but he could at least try. His first test came unexpectedly. A young black boy, maybe 10 or 11, wandered into the mall alone, looking lost. Marcus spotted him near the entrance, shifting nervously from foot to foot. A few weeks ago, Marcus would have assumed the boy was up to no good. Maybe casing the stores, maybe waiting to steal something. But not today. He approached the boy slowly, keeping his voice low and kind. "Hey there, you okay?" The boy looked up, eyes wide with relief. I lost my mom. She was supposed to meet me by the fountain, but I can't find her." Marcus crouched down to the boy's eye level. "What's your name, kid?" "Tyler." "All right, Tyler. We'll find her, no problem. How about we check the fountain first?" The boy nodded, and Marcus walked with him toward the center of the mall. As they walked, Marcus noticed the way a few passersby looked at the boy with subtle suspicion, the same way Marcus used to look at people like Nina. He felt a pang of shame, and then resolve. When they reached the fountain, Tyler's mother was already there, frantic and searching the crowd. The moment she spotted her son, she rushed over, gathering him into a tight hug. "Thank you," she told Marcus, her voice thick with relief. Marcus gave a small nod. "No problem. Just doing my job." But for the first time in a long time, it felt like the right job. That evening, Marcus sat at the edge of his bed again, but this time, the knot in his chest was loosening. The small act of kindness toward Tyler didn't erase what he'd done to Nina. It didn't change the past, but it was a step forward, a small step, but a real one. And maybe, just maybe, that was how change started. Days turned into weeks. The tension that Marcus carried slowly began to shift into something else. Resolve. The training sessions with Kendra continued, forcing him to confront not only the prejudice in others, but also in himself. It wasn't an easy process, and he still had bad days, days when he felt defensive or frustrated. But something had changed. He was trying. The probation period weighed heavily on him, but he made it through each day without incident. Todd still kept his distance, but Marcus noticed subtle changes in their interactions. When Marcus handled a situation well, helping lost customers or diffusing minor conflicts, Todd gave him an approving nod. It wasn't much, but it was something. Still, the real test came when Marcus spotted Nina again. It was a rainy afternoon, and the mall was quieter than usual. Marcus stood by the main entrance, watching the drizzle blur the view through the glass doors. Then, through the foggy window, he saw her, Nina Davenport, stepping out of a sleek black car, holding an umbrella over her head. For a split second, Marcus froze. His stomach knotted with anxiety. This was his chance, not just to prove himself to her, but to himself. As Nina approached the entrance, Marcus took a deep breath and opened the door for her. She glanced at him, surprised. Their eyes met, and Marcus gave her a small, respectful nod. "Miss Davenport," he said evenly, stepping aside. "Welcome back." Nina raised an eyebrow, but said nothing at first. She stepped inside, shaking off her umbrella. For a moment, it seemed like she might walk past him without a word. But then she paused. "You remember my name?" she said quietly. Marcus gave a small smile. "It's my job." Nina studied him, as if weighing something in her mind. "Is it?" she asked, her tone light but pointed. Marcus nodded. "It is now." There was a pause between them, a pause filled with something that felt like understanding. "I see," Nina said softly. She gave him a small nod of acknowledgement before turning toward the escalators. Marcus watched her walk away, feeling a strange mix of relief and closure. She hadn't given him a grand forgiveness speech or offered any guarantees that all was forgiven. But her nod, that brief moment of recognition, was enough. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. The weeks passed, and Marcus continued to improve. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but steadily. Each day, he made small choices to challenge the old patterns that had once ruled his thinking. And little by little, the mall began to feel different, too. Not like a battleground, but like a place where everyone could belong. Months later, Todd finally pulled Marcus aside for a conversation that felt long overdue. "You've come a long way," Todd said, his arms crossed, but his expression softer than usual. "I wasn't sure you'd make it through probation, but you proved me wrong." Marcus exhaled, relief washing over him. "I'll lift the probation officially next week," Todd continued. "But keep in mind, this isn't the finish line. It's just the start." "I know," Marcus replied. "I'm ready." Todd gave him a rare, genuine smile. "Good. Keep it up." A few days later, Marcus was finishing his shift when he spotted a familiar figure by the fountain. It was Nina again, sitting at one of the nearby tables with a cup of coffee. She didn't notice him at first, and Marcus hesitated. Part of him wanted to avoid her, to avoid reopening the wound of that humiliating day. But another part, the part that had spent months in reflection and training, knew better. He approached slowly, his hands tucked in his pockets. "Miss Davenport," he greeted her softly. Nina looked up, surprised but not unkindly. "Marcus." There was a brief silence between them, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. "I just wanted to say," Marcus began, "thank you for giving me a second chance." Nina smiled slightly, though her eyes remained serious. "My father believed in second chances. I guess I do too." Marcus nodded, grateful. "I won't waste it." "I hope not," Nina replied. There was no malice in her tone, only quiet expectation. "It's up to you now." With that, she gave him one last look, a look that wasn't quite forgiveness, but something close enough, and then returned to her coffee. Marcus walked away, feeling lighter than he had in months. That night, as Marcus sat at his small kitchen table, he realized something important. He hadn't just been given a second chance at his job. He'd been given a second chance at himself. The real challenge wasn't keeping the job. It was becoming someone worthy of keeping it. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt ready for that challenge.